Joining me now is Michael Cohen, former personal attorney to Donald Trump. He's the author of the book Disloyal, a memoir, the true story of the former personal attorney to President Donald J. Trump. Michael is also the host of the Mea Culpa podcast. Michael, good morning to you. There's so much to cover here. I don't know where to start, but I guess I'm going to start with that last bit because Donald Trump is, for the moment, continuing to defend Rudy Giuliani. How do you think that plays out?
Okay, so I don't really see it as Donald doing much for Rudy. He put out a very quick statement about how unfair it is. Rudy's this great patriot, etc. But I don't really see Donald coming out there and fighting for Rudy, fighting for this supposed illegal raid. And this is what Donald does. He did the same thing to me when he sat at the table. The only difference is he didn't use my name. Ultimately, what he's going to do is distance himself from Rudy because, again, that's what Donald does. He'll distance, and then he'll start to denigrate. Now, one of the things that we already saw from Donald is simply the fact that he's already stated that I never directed Rudy to do what he did. So he's already giving himself a legal out, which is probably what his insiders, and maybe if he has somebody beside him, who's somewhat confident, telling him, considering, remember what I had said when I stated that Donald Trump directed me to make the hush money payments. I guess he's probably learned something from that.
But that's interesting because that's the exact parallel, right? Donald Trump, you had receipts indicating that Donald Trump caused you to make these payments. It didn't take Donald Trump down. Does Donald Trump suffer for being dishonest about whether or not he gave his lawyers instructions?
Well, according to Rudy, he claims that he has insurance. My favorite was listening to his son, Andrew, who's as funny as Rudy is sometimes, making the ridiculous statement that his father is using sarcasm. That's another line that Donald used to say when he said the stupid line about injecting yourself with Clorox. Oh, I was just being sarcastic. It's not sarcastic. They clearly don't know what the word means or how to use sarcasm. That's just not sarcasm. So the answer is I don't believe so, no.
You are a lawyer. Rudy Giuliani's a lawyer. You kept a lot of records that maybe in some cases helped you. It certainly helped the prosecutors who went after you. I assume that there was a lot of stuff for them to find in Rudy Giuliani's office and phones.
Well, here's my thoughts on that. They've used the Maria Yovanovitch issue in order to obtain the warrant. Now they have a treasure trove of information on Rudy's cell phones or computer, and they're going to be able to dig through all of that information. Rest assured, this is not about Maria Yovanovitch. This is not just about Ukraine. This could be about a multitude of other issues of, that shady Rudy has been involved with. As I always say, this is just the icing on the cake when it comes to the Southern District of New York review of what's going to be probably inside of Rudy's cell phones. He'll probably have information in contact with Bill Barr, with Jared Kushner, with Don Jr. There could be issues regarding the illegal pardons that were given out. Who knows what's in there? Who knows? The Southern District of New York, and they don't play fair. And the irony here is that Rudy was the one who created that playbook for the Southern District to really take this gangster tactic, against individuals that they're prosecuting. Because they're really not prosecuting, they're convicting. So they already have Rudy on a FARA violation. Everything else, again, is just going to be icing on the cake.
Rudy has stayed very, very loyal to Donald Trump, in part because in the post-election era, he was getting paid a lot of money to do so. When push comes to shove, and as you said, he knows the Southern District of New York better than most, is he going to flip on Donald Trump or is he going to stay loyal?
Well, first of all, Rudy and Donald, and I said this on other shows, Rudy and Donald are not friends. It's not like they have this long-standing relationship where they would have dinners. Chris Christie actually had a long-standing relationship with Donald Trump. Rudy is a newcomer. Rudy only became loyal to Donald when Donald became president and Rudy could financially benefit from it. And Donald was able to financially benefit from Rudy in two facts. One is that he had somebody who wasn't charging him, and he had somebody who was defending him from the various different, allegations that were being brought against him. So there is not this long relationship. They didn't go to school together. They didn't like each other. Rudy certainly didn't care about Donald when he was mayor and he had power, and Donald was just a real estate guy. So do I think Rudy will flip on him? Look, Rudy's looked like he's lost his mind several times. I don't think he's gone that far that he's going to stay loyal to somebody who is going to throw him under the bus the same way he did to me. And Rudy should take me as the example. If Donald was willing to throw me under the bus, somebody who watched his back for more than a decade, Rudy is a newcomer. He's there for a year or two, right? There's no real relationship. So do I think Rudy will provide all the information that he can? Absolutely.
Michael, good to see you. Thanks, as always, for joining me. Michael Cohen is a former personal attorney to Donald Trump, and he is the host of the Mea Culpa podcast and the author of Disloyal, a memoir, the true story of the former personal attorney to President Donald J. Trump. Thank you, my friend.
Hey, thanks for watching our YouTube channel. You should know that you can follow today's top stories and breaking news and catch up on your favorite MSNBC shows all in one place. Download the NBC News app today.